Break your spell, Vanguard. Twitter is complaining again. Can somebody tell them now to sit down and listen to the facts? Brave the storm, Vanguard. Much machine a block. Can somebody please tell him to come back and talk about my shit deck? Rotovisor. Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Ezel here. Today I am back to cover lock because this is everyone's favorite mechanic for some very unknown reason. Okay, disclaimer straight away because I kind of have to. Every opinion in this video is my own. Every objective fact in this video I will make sure it's known as an objective fact, because this discourse is seriously really bad and it's again quite insane. I fought a lot of people online and I've also put in a lot of my hours for testing against the current lock in standard, as well as just lock in general, and I have quite a few things I want to say, which is why I'm making this video. It's very sad that I'm starting off DZ-BTO7 on such a somber note. I don't really have much to cover about that set in general, and that's mostly because anything to talk about that set is covered in this video. Every discourse comes and has a source in here, which, it really sucks that, we have to discuss this before we move on to anything. So, without further ado, let's get started talking. First and foremost, the lock in question belongs to this brand new deck called Artisaria, right? So she's the one that summons the Shadow Army tokens. They look like this now, and she's also a relative of Office who's in Lyrical Monasterio. I couldn't afford a single card from that deck, so I couldn't even put anything down here except this, which I obviously will get from my box opening. So yeah, I'm sorry, but I will now show you the lock in question for the deck. I will edit it onto the screen. I found an English translation for it, so here it is. This is, of course, the spell that is leading to the whole reason why Artisaria can lock. Artisaria works a lot like Office, but she does have access to this one card, and this one card is giving her all the strength. This is Megalomania, and it can only be played other than through the effects of Artisaria. And when it's put into your order zone, if your opponent's Vanguard is greater or greater, you choose from your opponent's rear guards and lock it. Okay, so now what is lock? Because I guarantee you not all of you were alive in 2013, and if you are, hello, please leave me alone. Now, the thing about lock is that you choose one of your own circles, right? You choose one of your opponent's rear guards, you turn face down, and you may be wondering, oh, Amos, like that's just control, right? That's just a dude is gone. Well, yes and no. The reason why a lot of people may be confused about lock is because we previously had lock from Messiah in B series, right? I'm sure most of you know who the Messiah is, but Messiah was following the Vanguard Zero style lock, where they would lock a unit and then after a while it disappears at the end of their turn, right? Because that's how Vanguard Zero did it. It did not allow the lock unit to stay past the turn of the locker. So the thing is that for Artisaria, as we can see here, it is regular lock, right? So the lock stays on from both your turn and your opponent's turn. So that's something you do need to keep in mind. It's not the same as the Messiah lock. Now, is Artisaria a good deck? I'm not going to comment on that. The deck is still wave 1. It plays a lot like Office. It only has a lock just through this one card that I'm mentioning here, and that's really all you need to know, because the deck itself isn't a problem, I would say. This video is meant to talk about the mechanic of lock, not really about Artisaria herself. She's fine, she's an okay deck. I'm very sure the pilots of her will innovate and find great ways to push the deck forward. So this is not a discussion on Artisaria, okay? If you want to say the deck is really good or really bad, it doesn't matter. I want to talk about lock, and let me show you an example of lock. For example, in the situation that you lock, the gameplay that you later have is just going to be impacted by it. You're just going to have one less column that you're going to have to deal with, and if you just don't find a way to just play on or just get enough aggression without losing potential boosters, it's just it's just going to be an issue further on. You just won't get full front row effects. You just won't be able to benefit off stuff like your persona, right? You're just going to lose an entire attacker. And even if the attacker is really valuable, for example, well, it's just too bad. And while that was just one example, I know many of you say, but I mean, this just one deck. And you know, I agree. Artisaria is just one deck with just one lock per turn. Now that is true, but this is an arms race, right? You are going to see them release better and more lock effects as this game progresses. The fact that they made lock in DZBTO7 only shows you that they are going to make more, right? Artisaria is going to get an upgrade. Office may potentially tap into lock now. Somebody down the line is going to get their hands on more accessible lock, including a potential Chaos Breaker encounter in June, right? And that just means that this issue cannot be ignored. You have to keep in mind that lock is going to be around, right? You have to keep in mind that this is going to be part of it, right? Now you just have one lock. Either you lock one of the attackers or you lock one of the boosters. Eventually it's going to be 2, 3, 4 locks, right? Yes, they may, you know, have other cards as well in the card pool that can help you stop lock, for example, Blind Demaya Nexus, Grand Ezel Scissors. But what about the format in general? How can everyone else in general beat lock? And I think that is the most important question right now. How can the rest of us beat lock? Because as I'm trying to stress here, this is going to be a part of our format from now on. You can't just walk in your card shop and say, today I will never see lock again. And then when your Artisaria sim walks in and says, hi, I want to play a game, you just dissolve in the dust. Like that's just not how this game works, right? Just don't play the matchup, am I right, my Jiva brothers? So the thing is that right now, we have to think of methods to beat lock. And there are a few ways you can beat lock, but it's not exactly the answers you want to hear. But I'm trying to present on the facts. So I'm going to try and tell you guys methods you can use to beat lock. The first and most obvious answer is Bracing Angel Ladder, as the people on Reddit have posted, buy out. But, you know, to be fair, this card was already popular before lock. It's just now that everyone should own a copy of this, at least by, you know, the third reprint of this thing. Because this thing is probably going to get reprinted by the end of 2025 again. They already issued a Japanese reprint for Dear Days 2. I sincerely doubt they're not going to reprint this because of how important it is. Bracing Angel Ladder, for those unaccustomed, basically it gives your board protection for 1 turn, and it's a Regalis piece, right? I covered it in my Regalis piece video, explained. You can check the link in the description below. I will link a lot of my other stuff there. I'll link the Messiah video, and I'll link some of the other examples I'll bring up later. But basically what you need to know for Bracing Angel Ladder is that it buys you 1 turn from any lock. That's really good in terms of it being completely generic. You can play this in any deck you want, including Old Faithful. It's safe. But it don't really matter in the long term because, you know, over time, Angel Ladder is going to expire, and then after that you can just go back to locking your opponent's rear guards. Absolutely no issue. But again, I do need to say something here that if that 1 turn does help you buy enough tempo to beat back against the lock deck, for example Artisaria or potential Chaos Breaker, it is definitely worth looking into this guy, especially if you can actually use your normal order play per turn on a Regalis Beast. Then put it on this, let it be this then if your locals, if your tournaments have a lot of lock, which of course this means you need to obviously read your results and learn more about what your shops, your environments are playing. You cannot be doing this blind and say, oh, today I will not fight anyone. I'm sorry, that's just not how it works. The second option is for you to play a token-based deck, right? If you just play a token-based deck, you'll be fine. Because if the token unit is locked, what actually happens is that, you know, when you lock it, the token cannot exist anymore. It just disappears, right? So even though you lose the unit, you still get the slot back. You still get the circle back. And that basically means you can just next time just call another token. It's not that impactful given that the token decks in question will already have method to spawn the token. So this is definitely something you can look towards if you personally are afraid of lock. So for example, anything that has, for example, the Shadow Army token or plant tokens is the other one. You generally can rely on things like that if you are worried about lock. If lock is a huge concern, playing these kind of decks will give you an advantage wherein even if your board gets locked, you get to keep the circles that you can call again next turn. Again, another popular method is going to be evasion, right? So evasion in the sense that if your rear guards can disappear by the end of your turn, they survive. And of course, this is where I have to put a few obligatory shoutouts. Obviously, the first one is my dearly beloved Nightrose Sama, because she bears a keyword in her deck. That keyword is Hollow from G series. Basically, you give the units additional effects, but at the end of the turn, they commit suicide. And the benefit of that is that because they are no longer on the board, you don't have any rear guards to lock, right? Of course, for Nightrose in question, for those of you who already know this deck competitively, you'll immediately realize that I'm playing into a trap, because Enlarged Gulf doesn't have Hollow, and he's like the most important card in the deck for most people. That is true, but it at least shows that there is potential for you to play with decks like this, right? If you play decks like Nightrose, Harry is the other one that's really popular because of Magia. If you play decks with keywords that encourage evasion, you generally will get benefits. If you don't know anything about Nightrose, please check the Nightrose encyclopedia, links in the description, I beg you, please. I spent a lot of time on that. Other decks that will see some shine in the spotlight despite being, nowhere near good, are decks that minus their own rear guards for their basic mechanic. Felty Rosa, my other beloved, and of course, the king of absolute bullshit, Ezel, because both of them send rear guards either to the bottom of the deck or their soul. It accidentally counters lock. And it's kind of funny given this guy's history if you know about it. So it's just really funny that decks that can get rid of their own boards through any shape or form, you actually have a huge advantage against lock, because now their mechanics worthless to you. Of course, in the future, if they do print stuff like Deluge where they force call lock units, then you're pretty much dead as well. But if not, you've got a pretty good thing going. I'd say you guys have a pretty good record that you can play. But inadvertently now we reach a problem. The problem is, who cannot beat lock, right? I know this is all the boos and cries, and this is where everyone says, Miss, you're terrible. I'm sorry, I have to tell you facts. The fact is, not everyone has evasion. The fact is, not everyone can actually play ladder in their decks, either because they're too poor, or you just can't have the slot to play ladder. And these are the decks that you will see will suffer. Decks that just cannot get rid of their own rear guards in time. If you get a front row lock, 2 front row lock, in the future if there's more lock, I hope there is not, you're going to suffer, right? It's going to be really hard for you to play at a competitive level if lock truly becomes competitively viable. And that is quite a fair bit of decks. I know there are some people going around saying, actually the casualty level is very low. You don't understand. You're looking at it in terms of 1 lock from Artisaria. When there is more, and there will be, more people will suffer, right? There will be more casualties. Even possibly Levy Druss may suffer, because now if you can just lock the Foxtail and potentially 1 more rear guard he leaves behind, that's a lot of spots you're taking away from the guy, right? Of course, Levy Druss is not actually affected by lock. That is just a fun thought experiment. But that is really all I can say about lock. And then, of course, the conclusion is, will this game get rebooted? Is this the end, or standard is standard dead? How are we going to fight this? What was the problem? I don't think standard is actually in a big problem. The reason for this is actually very simple. All the top decks in Japan right now are actually not impacted by lock at all. If you take a good look at the top 4 decks in standard right now in Japanese, okay, maybe you can plus minus a few here and there, you will actually notice that, no, they are actually not affected. Rezael has stuff like Nail Berries, they can evade and stuff. You have Vaga, who just slaughters both sides of the board, which is even worse for the lock player. You have Levy Druss. Levy Druss can actually retire its own rear guards through stuff like Shalnet, so you can actually protect your front row rears. You may lose a few spots at the back, but to be honest, as long as you can still do the 3 attacks with large numbers and your squirrel can jump around, that's pretty much a death sentence too. You also have Odium, where, yes, Odium does suffer to lock, but if you just use the Divine Skill turn, you can actually get the lock out of the way for the second turn. Again, I understand lock still impacts, Levidras and Odium. I'm just saying it's not that big of a deal. And then, of course, you know, that's pretty much all four of them. Messiah, we obviously don't need to talk about Messiah and Lock because, let's be honest, it's Jesus. Jesus can work through our locks. He's just going to unlock them in the battle phase. Instead, he loses the first attack, but he'll still get the second attack, which, you know, it's not that bad. So, will this game die? No. I don't think this is the right time for them to have introduced Lock. I know a lot of people saying, oh, this is the best time. I don't think so. I think anytime you introduce Lock, people will be upset. I think anytime you introduce Lock, some decks will suffer. But I think now, rather than before in DC's history, we are at a point of time where there is enough evasion options, generic protection, and potentially along the way, Lock counter bosses such as Blendemire Nexus and Grand Ezel Scissors and stuff like that will help. Having innate counters in your popular decks, or at least in decks in the card pool, will ensure that the Lock decks in the same card pool don't go way out of control, because now they have to bring their decks in the tournament thinking, what if my opponent is a huge Blonde Ezel fan? I'm gonna die. So because of that, the Schrodinger's box of whether Grand Ezel Scissors is Platinum Ezel is going to be a topic for another day. I think we need to wait for more results before we can even say whether, oh, this is the end standard or this is not. But from purely right now, is this a problem? No, I don't think this is a problem right now. I think Artisaria is okay with Lock right now. I don't see Lock destroying the format now, but I definitely see in the future, down the line, that Lock can be a problem if Bushiroad doesn't correctly balance it, okay? If they correctly balance it, it will be fine. But if they do not, we are in trouble. And that's really all I can end this video on, because there is really nothing else I can say. Again, if you guys have any thoughts about Lock, or if you've happened to play any tournaments through the opening weekend of DZ BTO7, please, I beg you, leave me a comment. Let's talk about it. What is Lock like to you? Do you feel Lock is a problem? But I do not want anyone in this comment section doom posting and be like, guys, the format is dead, or guys, the format is completely fine. Lock is still a problem. Lock is still Lock. We as a community need to work to fight against Lock in a competitive sense. Of course, if you're casual, don't really care about this, that's completely fine. But if you actually compete in this game, which I assume some of you do, you have to be prepared about Lock. It is still something in a format you have to adapt with. You cannot go in blind and say, guys, it doesn't exist. It does. It does. The invasion is coming. And if you are not prepared by June, you may be left behind. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time, and thank you mcrafter3000 for requesting this video. I don't do video requests, but you kinda gave me some money, haha, so I did it, but not really. This is not a sponsorship. I just want to say thank you for asking me to do this video. You made me sleep at 2 AM last night. If you come back here to this neighborhood, I will beat you. Goodbye.